Hello friends and welcome back to the RaoMoon Oracle. I'm Rao and today we are working on another little review here for one of my Oracle decks I have. This one is called the Soul's Journey Lesson Cards. So this one is by James Van Praagh. I'm not sure how to pronounce the last name, but I've had this deck for quite a long time actually. It was one of my first Oracle decks that I received. And what I really liked about this deck is that the mandalas are present on every single card. So you can kind of see on our cover here, we've got a mandala here. And each card has a mandala on it, and it has like a specific kind of like theme or more like emotion, like a state of being more so than anything. There's 44 cards in this deck, and where I found it very useful when I'm doing tarot readings, oracle readings, doing certain kinds of spreads, it helps kind of like narrow down the focus or kind of narrow down like a feeling or a concept or idea somebody might be going through. So I don't know exactly what read. I think it might have been the fake love reading I did pretty early on, but this deck I found was very, very helpful for getting that feeling kind of narrowed down a little bit more. I know when I was doing that reading specifically on myself, the card that came out was purpose. So this idea, right? So we've got like judgment, trust, indecision, relationships. There are these more like human concepts that we all understand and have an idea about kind of in our daily life, right? So it's similar in terms of like theme or overall picture, like the Archetypes deck by Kim Krans, but I think a little bit more focused in, a little bit more kind of reality based. So I really like these cards a lot. They have this kind of gold foil on the side, which is really fun. You can kind of see that shine right there going. And they got this cool pattern on the back. I really like the colors here. But every single card you see is going to have this really pretty mandala on it that kind of fits with the color and idea. And then you're going to have this word on here. So this one says judgment. And then underneath it says, I understand that everyone has their own unique path and challenges. So the focus of these cards, right, is a lesson. So a idea, if you think about the concept of judgment and how that plays out in your daily life, whether you're the one being judged, whether you are the one judging people, this idea of what lessons come out of like that idea of judgment, right? So it's talking about somebody who has their own unique paths and challenges. So not judging somebody because their experience is solely their own. You don't know exactly what everyone is going through at any given point in their lives, right? So I like those ideas for it. And I think it's very interesting how this touches on some like a little bit more like touchy subjects, potentially a little bit more difficult situations to go through. Grief, for example, that's a hard one for a lot of people, right? So that's something that we all go through in our lives at a certain point, whether it's the death of a pet, loved one, grandparent, everybody kind of goes through that at some point in their lives. So when it shows up in a reading, potentially, if I'm kind of needing some like clarification where it's like, okay, what's the actual situation that's happening? What's like that underlying emotion? What's that underlying issue? These cards really come in handy for that purpose. So I like it for that. Doubt's a good one. On here we've got envy. Let's see. Loneliness. Failure. Like these are like actual those kind of like overall life lessons, and it makes sense for why this deck is called as such. So I've used this deck quite a bit over the years. My box is quite beat up at this point. Some of the cards are kind of beat up. We'll see in the death card right here, it's got a corner. You'll see in the picture that I'll insert for some of the closer ups of the cards here. But like I got some corners bent on some of these. They've been treated lovingly and a little bit rough over the years because I've had them for quite a while. But this deck, I really liked. I was drawn to it initially because of all the mandalas in there. I like mandalas. I like the aspect of meditation that comes with them. The mandala coloring books are really fun for me. So just kind of, I like that pattern, that consistency, and I like to kind of draw mandalas myself actually. So I was really drawn to these cards for that reason specifically to start. And then as I've gotten further into my experience with reading cards, reading tarot cards, oracle cards, I've kind of finally found a place for them, for how these can help me in reading specifically, how I can kind of narrow down certain subjects or certain feelings that I'm kind of experiencing on that intuitive level. These kind of give a little bit more clarity to that. So that's been very helpful as I've been expanding my practice. These cards have come in handy in that aspect as well. These cards are super easy to shuffle. I like that a lot. The way the kind of film on the cardstock lends itself really, really well to shuffling, so they don't get stuck at all. That's really, really nice. So you'll feel them pull out individually each time, so that's a really nice aspect for these cards. They're not too big, not too small. I think they're about the right size, so for my hands expand, how far my hand expands, I can hold them like this, and that makes them pretty easy to handle in that regard as well. So good shuffleability. Good ability to shuffle. They're pretty to look at. That gold foil on the side, the backs. And then each card is very, very pretty on its own because it has all these different mandalas on each and every single card. There's not one that repeats at all. So A+ to all those aspects for these cards specifically. What else? Yeah, in terms of readings, that's kind of how I use them, is to just like, okay, hey, I'm getting clarification. I'm kind of figuring out what that underlying emotion or lesson is. I think they're really, really helpful in that regard. If you're somebody who maybe struggles to kind of figure out what you're feeling, if it's a little bit difficult to kind of identify emotions or identify bigger pictures kind of in your life, they might be helpful in that regard as well. Let's ask the deck. Let's see real quick. What do you want? Which card wants to come out in our reading today? Which card would like to be present for our video today? There it is. Forgiveness. Okay. So look at that pretty color combination, right? That orange and purple here. So forgiveness, it says, I acknowledge that harboring resentment blocks the flow of love. And then let's get into our description book here. So for this little description book, so they come on two pages here, usually expands both pages, and they're pretty short and to the point descriptions, which is really, really nice. So it says, I acknowledge that harboring resentment blocks the flow of love, and then the description underneath. You can never flow with your natural energy of love unless you release the negative energy of hate, anger, intolerance, or blame. Every soul in your path has free will, and you have no control over that. You do have control over is how you react to the manifestations of others' free wills. Holding on to that negative energy will strengthen karmic cycles, and forgiveness can break that pattern. The most important person you must learn to forgive is always yourself. Blaming yourself for failures blocks the natural flow of love, which will attract all good things into your life. So, again, that lesson coming out, right? That thought process. Yeah, so then in this card, right, so you see, like, you get a lot of color imagery with these cards specifically. So orange, when I think about orange, right, I think about that creativity. There is a lot of, like, kind of happiness and vitality that comes out of the color orange, similar to yellow a little bit, but orange feels a little bit more deeper, a little bit more sensual, sometimes depending. And then with the purple, right, we get that kind of higher knowledge. You think of the third eye, the crown chakra, coming in with that purple color, that deeper kind of spiritual knowledge, right? So if we're working on forgiveness, forgiving ourselves, forgiving others, that comes with a lot of spiritual awareness, figuring out where we're triggered, figuring out where we feel harmed, potentially figuring out what is hurting in us, where we have regrets, where we need to let go of things and move on. So it comes with a lot of higher knowledge in that case. So cool in that regard. I pulled a couple cards here for us to get like a closer look at. So let's see here. Okay, that one. And then I had one more. Where is it? Yeah, there's that one. Okay. So when I was shuffling these cards and trying to figure out which ones to kind of include as inserts, I was shuffling and asking, it's like, okay, what wants to be present for this reading in addition to that one little first card I got? So closer look, we have denial. So the denial card here will pop up and says, I acknowledge my fear, but I replace it with insight of awareness. And this one's interesting because the mandala in the middle, right, initially kind of like, it doesn't look like it wasn't very clean. It's not very like it takes a little bit like of a deeper look to figure out kind of what the pattern and the coloring in the mandala, which I thought was cool. We have death, which is a hard card, for a lot of people for sure, but it says, I'm learning that endings are merely beginnings. And death can be many, many aspects in our lives. It can be an actual physical death of some sort for somebody or something in our lives. And then it can be a more spiritual aspect or kind of metaphorical, right? So the death of a job, like, okay, we are moving on from a job that we're in, a death of a relationship, so breaking up with somebody. Those aspects kind of show up in the death card as well. But this one feels a little bit more on the spiritual side, right? And then balancing that out, of course, is love. And then it says, I commit to the practice of seeing the good in all things, the love card. And then patience, I accept everything happens in divine order. So this one's a hard card for me sometimes. This is a hard card when it shows up for me, because I'm told many, many times over to have patience, and that's difficult to hear sometimes for me personally. But here's a little bit closer look at all 4 of those cards here, so you can kind of get an idea for how this deck feels and working with it. So we got these really beautiful patterns and mandalas in every single one. Just in terms of color imagery yourself, that gives a lot more depth to the readings, a lot more energy in that case as well, right? So look at the patience card, for example. So you got those blues and greens. It doesn't quite mirror across the whole circle of the mandala, but it mirrors across the 2 parts, or the blues on the top and the greens on the bottom. So you think about patience, I think about green, and I think about growth, right? Plants growing and having patience as the plant is growing. Blue, I think about that more calm, centered, peaceful aspect. So coming to a peaceful place in ourselves talks about patience as well, right? So kind of interesting if you look at the color imagery in all the cards, the main color of the card itself, and then the coloring in the mandala. So back to our little booklet here. It's pretty easy to use. It's a really, really good starter deck, I think. The cards are pretty self-explanatory. There's not a ton of interpretation that needs to go into it. The card itself is like, okay, this is forgiveness, this is what it means, this is the lesson that it ties into it. And then the deeper aspects come when we're really diving into those lessons on a personal level in ourselves, in our lives. So the card is really just kind of flagging the fact that exists in us currently. I think that's kind of a good way to describe it, where it's like, okay, hey, this is present. It's letting you know this is present right now, and then it's up to you to kind of dive further into it and look into it a little bit more and figure out how that's playing out in a larger picture of your life. So from this point, right, if I were to like really not know something that's kind of going on in my life, I feel completely confused, not know anything going on about a particular situation, I'd probably start with this deck. This deck I'd start with and be like, okay, let me pull a card, let me figure out what's going on, and then at that point, then I would probably take like a tarot deck and help break it down further for myself, or maybe one of my other oracle decks that has a lot more interpretation or meanings, or a little bit more descriptions and symbology tied into it. This is really just like a good start, like the overall picture, the overall means for me. And then depending on how you decide to go about it, then you can dive into a lot more stuff at that point, deeper imagery, deeper meanings for your life. So again, it's a deck I've had quite a while. I've had it for quite a long time. It's one of my first ones, and a really, really handy deck to have, I think. I think it fills a place in my cards, in my oracle decks and my tarot decks that I didn't quite know was missing until I started using it, and I was like, okay, that's what I can use it for. That makes sense. That's gonna help me a lot in specific readings. So let us see. Any final words here, Soul's Journey cards? Any final words? Maybe. There it is. Failure again. Failure. So I understand that a mistake is only an opportunity to learn. So I'll leave you with that, friends. That is all I have for us today. I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye.